With all the shameless promotion out the way, let's go ahead and set the table for our esteemed guest today. I've already mentioned some of his insane comic stats so far, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the non-comic accolades, right? Aside from all the great things he's done in comics, today's guest has also contributed over 60 paintings for Magic the Gathering cards. And if the range this man isn't apparent already, his 2014 Eisner Award for Best Reality-Based Work comes from his massive contribution to the critically acclaimed graphic novel The Fifth Beatle, the Brian Epstein story. Shortbox Nation, without further ado, and a chance for me to catch my breath, let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Andrew Robinson. Hey, Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you for joining, by the way. And most importantly, thank you for being a part of the Collective Con lineup. You're on the, you're among Laura Martin will be there, Mike Spicer, Clay Mann, and of course you as well. It's going to be epic.
Yeah, sounds like a good lineup. I'm excited. Plus, I mean, I grew up and raised in Florida on a farm.
That's right. I learned today.
There in St. Augustine.
Yeah, I learned today that you're a fellow Florida boy like myself. You were, raised St. Augustine, which is maybe 40 minutes from Jack's. What kind of memories do you have from your time in Florida or growing up in Florida?
Lots of time spent cutting grass, working on the farm. It was a potato farm.
Okay.
And when I wasn't working there, I worked on some other farms like blueberries and corn and stuff like that. Never got into surfing, but I was into skateboarding for a minute.
Coolio.
And then, of course, art. Art was a big part of my formative years, especially in high school.
Do you remember any of the comic shops? Here, I guess in St. Augustine, or any of the ones here in Florida that you'd frequent?
Honestly, at that point, I wasn't going to comic shops.
Okay.
I was just, I sort of lived out in the sticks. So I would just go to convenience stores and whatever was there on the rack. And that's pretty much where my choices at the time. So it was kind of random.
Okay.
It could be Spider-Man, Hulk, Superman.
Okay.
Just really whatever I could find locally.
Got it. And I understand that you traded in your Florida tan for some California sun. You're living in California now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the comic scene like in your area?
It's pretty big. I mean, just in Pasadena where I'm at, there's probably like 3 or 4 comic shops.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's a ton in every part of LA, Glendale, Hollywood, out by the beaches. Manhattan Beach has got a great shop, the Comic Bug.
Okay. Do you have a personal like a poll list set up anywhere by you?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. Too busy making comics to be reading them. That's how it is.
Yeah, I mean, or I'm just, I'm reading comics by friends, like Rick Remender. I got like the huge collection of Black Science from him, so that's been a great read.
Cool. Yeah, awesome read.
I still love like all the stuff that's coming out from Dan Klaus. I think he does a book every couple of years or so, but it's pretty amazing.
And I believe he just announced a new one, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I saw that. I'm forgetting the name, but yeah, I saw him announce like a new book coming out.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be it's called Monica is the name of his next graphic novel. Good stuff. Speaking about Rick Remender, I'm glad that you brought him up because as I was getting ready for this interview, I was trying to think back to my first like conscious exposure to your work. And I landed in 2 spots primarily. The first one being I want to say I might have met you at a MegaCon. And you were promoting, I believe, Fifth Beatle. So it had to be sometime in like 2013, 2014. I walked by your booth, and it was actually I think you had a print of the Fifth Beatle stuff, and I was like, oh shit, that's rad. Like some music illustration here at MegaCon. I think I had gotten just so tired of seeing like the same like Spider-Man print. So your table like grabbed my attention, right. and I got to meet you then. So that was many years ago, and I was like, all right, well, what about the comic work? And I believe my first introduction to your art style and your work might have been for a cover you did for Black Science #1, written by Rick Remender, obviously. I think you had like cover B. and that was like my first time picking up your work. And then another one came to mind, another Rick Remender joint, and it was his 2014 Marvel series, Winter Soldier: The Bitter March. And I loved
Mhm.
your covers for that because it felt like really pulp noir, and like I mean, the whole book, was dealing with like a shield agent and the Winter Soldier. So I thought
Right.
your covers were like excellent. Do any of those series come to mind?
Yeah, especially those Marvel covers I did with Rick. Yeah, the cool thing was that I got to actually put the title into the artwork.
Oh yeah, yep, I remember that.
So that was definitely new for me. Because usually, you're just doing the artwork and they
Hmm.
have the same title and they use it the same way, the same composition every time. But this was like you could put the title wherever you wanted to and just could like flow and mix in with the artwork. So it was quite a cool experiment.
How is it working with Rick, especially like I guess in those days or in that capacity as the cover artist? Does he give like detailed notes, or does he kind of give you an outline, or is it kind of free reign to do anything?
I mean, if he has like a clear idea,
Hmm.
he'll give that to me. But I would definitely say with most of his creator-owned stuff, I'm pretty much open to just do whatever's cool. And I mean, I think as long as you're not giving away spoilers and you're just making cool artwork,
Hmm.
that's really all that matters. And yeah, he's pretty easy to work with. He's not really nitpicky per se, unless it's something really vital, important to
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, that's right. If I'm not mistaken, you guys are, you just mentioned reading Black Science, but even to this day, most recently, I think some of the more recent work you're doing is the covers for his creator-owned stuff on Scumbag, right? I think he even did the interiors for issue 2.
Yep. Yeah, I penciled and inked issue 2, and then I did variants for issue 1 and 2.
Cool.
And then I just have finished a couple of covers for some new books he's going to have coming out.
Oh, that's rad. Okay, awesome. So was I lying at the intro then? Is it safe to say that you've probably drawn just about maybe every popular comic character, or at least superhero from the big two there is? Is there any character left untouched by you?
Well, as far as like actually published, um, there's still quite a few characters that I haven't, drawn or painted, especially I think for Marvel.
What are some of the white whales?
Uh, well, no,
What are some of your white whales?
uh, I mean, let's see. Like I'm probably most well known at Marvel with the Spider-Man covers I did,
Hmm.
probably in 2019. Um, and then I did some X-Men covers way back in the day, like early 2000s. I did a Conan Barbarian cover recently for Marvel. Um, I'm trying to think what else. The stuff I did with Rick.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's not even counting all the DC stuff too. Hawkman, Starman,
right,
all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I really had a big push. It was 1999, and I joined the Jolly Roger studio with Tony Harris.
Hmm.
And he got really busy while he was on Starman and couldn't do the covers. So I took over the painted cover gig that I got from Tony, and that really blew me up as a painted cover artist. And so that opened up other books like you know Batman, Hawkman, um, the JLA.
Yep.
I think what else?
Oh, I think I lost you a little bit.
Sorry about that. I'm low tech using my phone.
All good, all good. You're coming in and clear though. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
I'll say I started reading Starman. I mean, I was super late to the game, but I started reading Starman when the DC Universe app first, like in those like first years it launched. And I was just kind of blown away by it. I mean, all the credit that people give to James Robinson, Tony Harris about how epic that series was really lived up to it. And when I got to that point of your covers, it was even like a bigger treat. I was like, damn, some of these covers, man, deserve to be like, blown up and put in a museum, like, and including your Hawkman stuff. I think personally, those are two of my favorite, bodies of work that you've done. And the fact that like you
right.
were so heavily involved, I think that's some of like the benefits of having like well-established cover artists is sure you don't get to get like that volume of work compared to like an interior artist, but
Right.
your bibliography, man, and how long you'll stay doing covers for a run, especially long runs like Hawkman and Starman. I mean, it's definitely definitely tip my hat to you.
Yeah, and again, that was a fun time with the Starman covers because being in a studio, you're there with like three or four other guys, so you have plenty of people to help you
Hmm.
model and set up scenes and do lighting and take pictures and all that. Because sometimes I might be the model, sometimes Tony Harris, sometimes other guys there in the studio, and then we had a lot of props also and some costumes and
Yeah.
stuff. So that was a very cool experience.
If you don't mind me kind of bigging you up, because you're bringing up the lighting, that's definitely one of my favorite attributes of your work. And some like key Hawkman covers come to mind, like issue one and some of those earlier ones. I always felt like you had a knack for placing lighting. It always felt very cinematic. A lot of your covers feel very cinematic, like they belong
Right.
on a movie poster or something like that. Um,
Yeah. Well, again, it comes from like usually you want at least two strong sources of light,
mhm.
and so you'll have like a really strong, like a hot light, a hot source, which is usually for rim lighting, and then a softer one for the larger area of the form that you'll see. But it makes it very dramatic.
Yeah, well said. Dramatic. Yeah, that's. I also will to pay further, respect. I've always felt like your art is reminiscent, like of those vintage pulp book covers, especially like ones done by Jim Steranko. I always felt like he captured like this mood and this atmosphere, and I see a lot of
Yeah.
that in your work. And then, but at the same time, like I was reading, you actually did some interiors for a story in Batman Black and White #5, and your interior work, man. There's so much charm and playfulness to it. It reminds me of like Playboy cartoonists like Jack Davis, and then you've got like a dash of Alex Toth. Like there's, and not only that,
Right.
but you
Yeah.
also draw some of the best chiseled chins in the game. That's usually how I could tell is your work, especially with like your male characters. They just have like such a heroic, chiseled chin. Even that's weird as hell to say.
Right. I know what you're saying. I mean, but Batman should have that kind of chin.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right about that. So obviously you're a pro who dabbles in, and seemingly you're a master in a few different medias, I believe you work in vine charcoal, watercolor, gouache, ink, etc. What's your favorite or go-to media to work with? Do you have like a preference?
Um, I mean, I really don't like. Each one has um their beautiful qualities, and sometimes if it's just simple like just pen and ink,
Hmm.
and brush and paper. I mean, it doesn't get much more simple than that, but still the range that you can get with like the high contrast, or you can crosshatch. There's so many things you can do just with line and brush. But then getting into watercolors, that's the beauty of like washes and letting colors do what they do, and wet on wet and dry on wet, and reverse and all that.
Yeah.
And acrylics are fun, and then of course we just do mixed media and just layering things and throwing in some collage, throwing in magazine transfer. Uh, so yeah, it's nice to go back and forth. Like sometimes it's nice to get into a painting and just see what happens, and then it's nice to do something black and white, which I would say is a bit more controlled.
Okay. And I was, in studying your Instagram primarily, I noticed that you post. There was a period at least where you posted a lot of like sketches and things that you're working on, whether they be like commissions, maybe some official work and things like that. Do you mind sharing like what is a day to day for you like when it comes to like waking up and working? Like how fast do you churn out sketches, or how much are you sketching and drawing constantly, especially like being 30 years in?
Right. Well, I mean, you're pretty much drawing and painting every day.
Hmm.
Uh, so I mean, some time is spent looking up reference, researching the subject matter, and then there's doing the initial sketch, getting that approved, and then going from sketch to final piece. Where if I really like my sketch, then I'll grid off my sketch and make a bigger grid on my final piece of paper, and sometimes I'll use the light box as well in
Hmm.
the projector. And then it's just refining things, painting, and then once it's done, scanning it in and doing a little bit of Photoshop and sending it on its way.
Hmm. Okay. And I guess mentioning like you being a vet in the game, how do you keep yourself motivated after so many years? Like, what is it about comics that still keeps you excited and going and interested in the I guess in the industry and medium?
Well, I think it's good to keep learning, trying new things. It's hard to just do the same thing
Hmm.
exactly the way you've done it over and over and over again. But it keeps it interesting. When I artists that I'm into, and I see what they do, whether they use this certain pen or they use this little bit of splatter and how they do it and different tools, different techniques. Yeah, I just got to keep learning, keep growing,
What's
and try not to repeat yourself too many times.
what's the last, I guess, like thinking back, what's been the most recent significant change that you've incorporated? And speaking of, you talking about having to switch things up, what's the last thing that you switched up to like positive, I guess, like effect?
Um, hmm.
Or I'll add to that question. What's been a recent, I guess, artist or body of work that you've looked at that's like really gotten you inspired to like try new things or push the
Right.
envelope?
I would probably say Matteo Scalero has been a huge influence,
Solid choice.
probably over the last definitely 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Um, Sean Gordon Murphy,
Oh yeah,
Dan Panosian.
good stuff.
Um, let's see, and always for like cover design. I go to Dave Johnson a lot, man, because he's on point with like just design,
Yes, he is.
um, strong cover design as well as composition and color theory. Yeah, like his covers, you definitely notice from across the room.
Oh yeah, yeah. If anything, I feel like I don't we don't get enough Dave Johnson work. Like it's very sporadic, but when you do get it, you're like, damn, I only want more. I really only want more.
Yeah, yeah, he's definitely a master.
For sure, for sure. That's a solid lineup. I mean, that's a great lineup of artists to be like constantly
Yep.
inspired by. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Matteo Scalera recently it just had like his own comic run too, and I'm drawing a blank on what it was called.
Yeah, like he's done some stuff already after Black Science.
Yeah,
Oh, he did a story with Sean Gordon Murphy.
that's
Um,
right. Okay, that's right.
I believe like Harlequin was in there and
Yeah,
the Joker and
yeah. I think
Batman.
yeah, it might have been one of his White Knight, but I thought he had like a creator owned one that just came out, and if I figure it out, I'll mention it. But I know it came out, and people were like, "God damn, Matteo Scalera's best, still got it and all that."
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah, he does. All right, let's see. So kind of still sticking to just like your years and your experience and with how long you've been in the game. I'm curious to hear like what are some of the biggest changes or developments in the comic industry that you've lived through? Like, is there one or two in particular that come to mind for better or worse? Like, I'm
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm old enough that I remember the deadline was trying to get to FedEx before they closed to actually send actual
Okay.
artwork. Even yeah, the my magic cards, like I was sending the actual paintings to the
Hmm.
publisher, and pencil pages to be sent to get lettered, actually lettered by hand, and then to go to the inker,
Hmm.
sending in painted covers to DC Comics. Yeah, and then just praying that you'll get the stuff back and it's not bent or a hole poked through it or whatever. And
Good old
um,
FedEx. Good old
yeah,
shipping and handling.
yeah. And then I remember like it was, I think around 2000, 2001, you know, it was like, hey, somebody at the studio at Jolly Roger was like, um, hey, who wants to learn Photoshop? And I was like, I don't know. Like, why do I need to learn that? And the next thing you know, it's like luckily I was, got my head on straight. And I was like, okay, I better learn this, at least have some fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then within like a year or two, like I got my first, Mac, and
It's been no turning back since,
realized,
huh?
and you realize like, wow, this is how it is now,
Yeah.
And then shortly just make that leap from you never mail stuff anymore. You just scan it in and do your own photoshopping and color correction.
Hmm.
Then you just send the file in, and yeah. So I was certainly there to see like, wow, that was a big change.
Yeah.
And then I guess like in the last 10 years, for better or for worse, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that fun stuff, which I guess on the pro side, it's like great to be able to share your artwork
Mm-hmm.
with fans all over the world and also see the art of great artists, again, all over the world. And the speed at which we're learning and consuming, new styles, new processes, new equipment, whether tangible, in the real world or digital. Yeah, it's amazing.
There's definitely a double-edged sword there. In your lack of words on the negative side, I know where that double-edged sword is with it. But yeah,
Right.
I guess I haven't, I guess I don't appreciate the fact that social media, the way it impacts like comic book, creators is, like you said, sharing your work, but also I guess having like that direct line to, your fans. And I'm assuming, like just even from like a business acumen side, like being able to build a brand and, sell your own stuff as well, like directly to consumer. I'm sure that was a huge change whenever that really got popped off.
Oh yeah, 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 definitely. And just it helps to be able to reach out to fans,
Hmm.
and plus people that want commissions or art prints or original art. Yeah, there's such a great like connection and community out there.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of community, I love asking this question. Time we've got a creator, especially an artist on the show. If you had to create a comic Mount Rushmore, this is something we've done on the show, our own personal list, and it's always a good time. But if you had to create a comic Mount Rushmore based on your comic/art icons and favorites, who would be on that list? Who would be on the Andrew Robinson comic book Mount Rushmore?
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with actual artist.
Let's go.
I would have Frank Frazetta.
Mm, solid.
This is a tough list because I had a lot of people I want to put in here, but I chose four.
There we go.
So Frank Frazetta, Walt Simonson,
Oh, come on. Classic.
Moebius,
Mm.
and Bill Sienkiewicz.
Solid. That might be one of the better Mount Rushmore lists I've heard. Very solid list. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, those are, I mean, along with many other artists, but those are like some just huge influences on how I see
Hmm.
comics, what I grew up with, um, people that I loved as a kid and I still love them now.
Yeah. We did a artist spotlight, and actually one of our best played episodes, still to this day, is an artist spotlight. So kind of like a deep dive episode that we did about Moebius, and admittedly, and we did this one maybe it's going on 3 years now, but 2 or 3 years ago, and admittedly, it was like my first time really deep diving, Moebius and everything he's done, and still to this day, like the impact he's had just in that short time for me, just appreciating art and like really getting into like French comics even in a larger scale. He's definitely an artist. Anytime I hear his name, my ears perk up big time.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see his work in Star Wars,
Hmm.
Blade Runner,
Yeah.
Alien, just to name a few.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how Taika Waititi does. If I think the movie's still a go, but I think he's supposed to be on board for NCal. I think he's going to be the director for Mobius's infamous NCal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm
Well, that should be cool.
yeah. I don't know if that's changed or not, but I remember when that was
Right.
announced, I was like, oh shit, this could be huge and such a good director to go with it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. Well, I know you're also part of the Essential Sequential group. So kind of like a art collective that represents, comic book artists and just artists in general. They've always got a solid setup at a lot of the conventions I've been to. I think actually when I might have met you at Heroes Con all those years ago, I think you were part of the Essential Sequential crew, and even now I can go to Hero. I'll probably see them once again at Heroes Con, but they've always got a strong lineup of artists, and I wanted to know. I wanted to list some of these names, some of your fellow Essential Sequential colleagues and peers, and I want to kind of hear some of the words that come to mind. All right. So first and foremost, I know that Essential Sequential, the roster is huge. I definitely recommend anyone go to their website, click artists. You'll be pleasantly surprised that maybe some of your favorite comic artists are listed there. But I noticed that David Finch is counted among their roster. What words come to mind, or what do you have to say about David Finch?
I mean, great artist, and I got to do a podcast with him, I guess, last year.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely knows his craft, and has a lot to say about drawing and anatomy. I learned a lot, even at my age of being a bit over 50, just from like watching like his breakdown of the head and the body, and it was interesting to hear his doctrine about drawing.
Awesome. So you're still picking up new game from fellow vets as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's always something to be learned every day.
Awesome. All right, and then what about Dan Panosian? And I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Panosian?
Dan Panosian.
Panosian. There we go. How about Dan Panosian?
Well, Dan, definitely a great guy to hang out with, because we certainly hang out a lot at shows and occasionally here in LA. But just phenomenal artist, and he's somebody who is like, as he gets older, he's just getting better and better and better every year. Like his drawing skills, layouts, storytelling. Yeah. I mean, he's one of my favorites, and on top of the great drawing, his inking style is just got so much meat to it, and style and energy. Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's. I've run into him a few times. I think at like Heroes Con, and he just got such good energy to him, man. Like just a friendly guy that you'd want to hang out with outside of just like a comic convention. All right, and then next up, this is another a peer of yours in the Essential Sequential group that'll also be at Collective Con this weekend, and that's Clay Mann. What words come to mind for Clay?
I don't know Clay Mann that well. So again, it all depends on because there's some people that I haven't met yet in the group. It all depends if we do shows together and then have a chance to bond and talk, and but hopefully we will this coming up weekend.
Oh, that'd be a great little team up right there. Hopefully you get that chance. So I guess what, in place of Clay Mann, who is I guess who would you say is like maybe a close friend of yours that's also in the Sequential group outside of maybe Dan and David? Is there another name that you're pretty close to that maybe you've learned a lot from?
I'm good friends with Cully Hamner.
Oh, that dude's super nice dude.
Sean Crystal, Mark Irwin. Let's see. Carrie Nord. I'm not close friends with him, but I certainly love to hear him tell stories, and I love his artwork. But Klaus Janson.
Oh man, I bet he's got stories for days.
Yeah, that's a guy where you just like keep your mouth closed and just listen.
I bet that is that's the OG of OGs right there. Damn, I can only imagine what an Essential Sequential like holiday party would be like. For a comic nerd myself, I feel like I'd have a heart attack if I was in the same room, because I mean they've really got such a strong list of like of comic fan favorites on here, and you've named a bunch.
I mean, there's also Eric Canetti.
Yep. J.G. Jones, the Kubert brothers. Come on, man. Yeah.
John Timms.
Mm-hmm. That's good stuff. All right, Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and pivot the convo here just a little. Like I said, I was scrolling through your Instagram feed today trying to get an idea, doing some research, and I saw a post that really perked my ears. You made one of a sketch of John Coltrane, and you had a caption with it that encouraged everyone to go study the covers of jazz records from the infamous Blue Note Records. First of all, before I ask my question, I wanted to ask, are you familiar with this book here? It's called Jazz Covers. It was put out through Taschen. I forgot what year, but it is essentially a giant book of like, just jazz covers. And they, give a little blurb about each one and all that.
Right. I'm not, but that's a book that I think I need to get.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to bring it up. I highly recommend it. But my real question on that was, can you elaborate more on that post and maybe speak to how music informs your process or art making.
Right. Like I said, I'm not the biggest jazz connoisseur as far as the music, but I do appreciate it. I think it's one of those things you kind of grow into as you get older and a little bit more mature.
Hmm.
But the Blue Note covers, just the covers themselves, this book, I would say that if you didn't have the money to go to school to study graphic design, just buy that book.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Just buy that book, and with your own sensibilities, and if you know anything about the rule of thirds and composition, but go through there and just see how they really push the laws of composition. You know, they push it with big areas of dead space and just the innovative process from cover to cover. Like if I'm stuck and I feel like I just do the same thing over and over
Hmm.
again on cover designs, it just gives you a fresh place to start and just open your mind a bit to thinking outside the box. You know, I know it's kind of a cliche, but that's what I get out of this book.
That's all. And is it the cover art of Blue Notes, the collection? Is that the name of the book?
Yeah, it's mainly like it's a mix of like graphic design and photography,
Okay.
but a few of the Blue Note covers are drawings by Andy Warhol, which are also they're
That's
amazing.
right. Yeah.
Like he was like quite a great cartoonist.
Hmm. Andrew, are you a vinyl enthusiast? Like, do you have a record collection?
I've actually been thinking about getting a record player, but I do have a few records. But I've got an awesome neighbor who lives just across the way, and he's been in punk bands since like the
Hmm.
'70s, and he still plays in one. But he's got quite the record collection. So usually, if I want to just like hang out, I can go over there and we'll just like go through records um, and again, it's another place where it's just a lot to learn.
Cool. Cool. If I may make one recommendation, I'm sure you'll have a busy weekend, Collective Con going on. But if I may make one recommendations away from like just the world of comics, I would highly recommend on the topic of records and music and especially jazz, if you can find time to go visit Tiger Records, which won't be too far from the Prime Osborne, but Tiger Records, fantastic record store. If my man Warren Evans is working that day,
Hmm.
I think he works Sunday. Huge jazz guy. He'd probably talk your ear off about Blue Note, but I think you would enjoy Tiger
Right.
Records, and you'll probably leave with a really badass record player. So just my
Oh,
recommendation.
cool. All right.
Good stuff. So considering like that post, and then I'll be asking something about the Fifth Beatle here shortly. Do you have like a particular playlist of music you like to have going on while working, or do you have like anything? It may be like a movie, but yeah, do you have anything like that when you work?
Um, yeah, it's usually either music or I might listen to just episodes of Seinfeld
the the
and
ultimate
uh,
the ultimate background TV show.
yeah,
You don't really need to pay attention
and
that much to it, but it's great
right.
for it.
And I also loved news radio,
Hmm.
and it's tragic that Phil Hartman passed away when he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's now on Prime,
Okay. That's
and
good to know.
so you can catch all the seasons. So I've been watching that also, and it still holds up. It's pretty damn funny.
Hmm. And when you do play music, what type of music are you playing?
I'm kind of all over the place. Like, I mean, the go-tos are like Johnny Cash,
Okay.
Nick Cave. But I'm listening to some new stuff. It's fairly new, like groups like Wet Leg, Cannons, um, Amel and the Snippers,
Okay.
the Viagra Boys. Yeah, I'm like all over the place.
Good stuff. No, that sounds like an eclectic mix right there. All right, and then obviously I'd be doing everyone that's a fan of your work a disservice if I didn't ask about your work on the award-winning graphic novel The Fifth Beatle, which I have you quoted as saying it was quote the biggest endeavor of my 20-year career. Obviously, that was a quote from a couple years ago.
Right.
Considering that project recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary, I'd like to know if that sentiment still holds true. Is the Fifth Beatle still like? Do you still? Is it? I'm sorry. Let me ask that again. So, I'd like to know if that sentiment still holds true. Have you worked on anything else that rivals the Fifth Beatle, or does that project still stand in a league of its own?
It's still in a league of its own.
Hmm.
I mean, I hope that I can do something like that again. But yeah, that's still to this day like the biggest thing that I've accomplished. I mean, it was on so many levels. It was satisfying, but it was, a very, very, very difficult project to get through.
Hmm.
Just from like a research standpoint, I mean, again, so much of my day could just be consumed with just like finding the right uh, reference for a certain year that the Beatles were around, what they were wearing, their haircuts, the technology, cars, the architecture, the buildings, the historic places where they were. Trying to find references of the cave as it was then in Liverpool, which it's been moved, I think, across the street.
Hmm.
Like the original venue where they were discovered by Brian Epstein, doesn't even exist anymore.
Wow.
So again, trying to find photographs, and then within the context of the book, I'm trying not to just regurgitate these classic photos we've all seen a million times, but I'm trying to at least change the angle, put my own
Hmm.
spin on it, sort of make it my own, I suppose.
Do you have a do you have a particular page or panel, whatever it may be, from that project that maybe you're the most proud of? Maybe one that you personally framed or something like that. Anything like that?
Um, I'm pretty happy with the double page spread of A Hard Day's Night.
Hmm.
It was kind of like a nice like collage double page spread, which was a lot of fun. Um, but then as far as like the finality of the book, the last two pages that I was working on was the party scene at the very end,
Okay.
where the Who was there, the Rolling Stones, Clapton, and so to have all these like famous figures in one room together, um, again, it was satisfying to get it done, but trying to get there was quite a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. I also read that just the amount of media. I think you described it as actually I have it here. It's more like a mixed media explosion. I understand that you worked on painted on wood, illustration board, watercolor paper, Bristol board, and I mean the list like really goes on. It sounds like a massive endeavor in regards to
Yeah,
like different techniques all combined in one.
yeah, it was, and I mean I had plenty of pages to try different mediums, surfaces,
Hmm.
paint, yeah, you name it.
I bet. All right, and I've got to ask because I can only imagine the amount of research that was probably involved in this. It sounds like obviously you're still like you're still like pouring beads of sweat just thinking about it. Is what I'm noticing. What is one interesting fact, I guess, about whether it be Brian Epstein or just the Beatles in general that you learned during that research that still kind of lives in your head rent free? Is there like one interesting or crazy fact that you learned about them that you can share?
Um, I mean, I guess it was interesting to see where they came from, and to see how much they were into Elvis,
Hmm.
and again, like all the blues stuff that they were getting because they actually lived by a port. So you had like sailors and people from the States bring over, American music and the blues and rock and roll.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of cool that just by sheer geography, location, they had this great influence in this little sort of poor, port town.
Yeah.
And then to see them like in the beginning, like they were like serious like rockers,
Hmm.
like the greased back hair, the ducktails, the leather jackets, and and then it was mainly it's Brian Epstein's influence that sort of made them the more like the mod, you know, the mop like
Yeah.
hairdos and the neat suits that we kind of recognize them from today.
That's cool. Yeah, they say what did they say? Like one of America's greatest exports that, we don't sometimes recognize is just our pop culture. How much our pop culture can influence other countries
Yeah.
and, their art.
Well, I mean, I think it's the beauty of and it's still an experiment that's going on to this day. But we're a melting pot. Like
Hmm.
I think no
Well
other
said.
country has ever been. Maybe besides Rome, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, just this mix of different peoples and music and styles, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So speaking of the fifth Beatle, that once again brings me back to meeting you for the first time at Collective Con all those years ago. Vividly remember the copies of the book that you had there, and even some of the original prints you had. Kind of beating myself up that I didn't grab a few more of the prints, but it is what it is. Maybe I can grab one when you're at Collective Con. But what can people expect from your appearance at Collective Con this weekend? Will you have any like exclusive prints for sale, sketchbooks, or are you taking any commissions?
I am taking commissions, and I'll have a few art books. I'll have some prints, um, and I'll have like a bit of original art. Most of it is with my manager, who's not going to this show.
Okay.
But I'll be bringing actually some artwork, character designs from some of the Batman and Green Lantern animated series that I worked on
Oh, hell
for
yeah.
Warner Brothers. Yeah. So definitely, yeah, come check that out. I'll have some of the magic cards, the artist proofs. I'll have those for sale. Um, and like I said, a few pages and a few covers.
I'm going to go ahead and
That'll
admit,
be great.
Andrew, right now that I had a complete blind spot to this animated work of yours. What was the deal with that? You said Batman and Green Lantern?
Yeah, I worked on the Long Halloween, the Batman animated feature,
No
and
way.
my designs are in part two.
Oh, you can.
So
Damn.
when Scarecrow um, sprays the fear gas on Batman, and he has like this kind of like delusions of his parents, and Scarecrow's on a horse and all that. I did all the designs for how Batman would look in this sort of like weird nightmare scape,
Hmm.
and his parents, and yeah, it was cool to see that they actually used the stuff in the show.
Damn. You can guarantee, right? As soon as this interview is done, I'm going to one make sure I go find my copy of Fifth Beatle, and I'm going to go ahead and rewatch Long Halloween. I'm gonna look for your stuff.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on HBO Max if you have that.
Okay, done. Do I do? So I guess considering all these different like industries that you've worked in, do you have a personal favorite? Like, do you like doing animated stuff more at this point, or is it the Magic the Gathering stuff, or is it still like comic covers? Like, do you have a preference or one that like you still kind of maintain that excitement for?
Comics is still like
That's
my
cool.
mainstay. Yeah.
That's cool to hear. Okay, awesome. All right, and then Andrew, on the topic of still on the topic of conventions, you're obviously not a stranger to comic conventions or in-store signings.
hmm
You've like I said, you've got 30 plus years under your belt. What would you say is one of your most memorable convention experiences, or like maybe an interaction with a fan, or even like a comic colleague or idol of yours? Do you have like
Right.
a story to share?
Um, a few years back, I think it was 2016 or 2017. I did a show in Toronto,
Hmm.
and my friend John Beatty was there. Um, awesome inker, has
Yeah,
been
yeah.
working in comics since the 80s.
Hmm.
So he invited me to a dinner with Jim Shooter
Wow.
and Mike Zeck.
Oh, wow. Mike
So
Zeck.
imagine that.
Hell
So
yeah.
the three guys that worked on the Secret Wars,
Hmm.
I got to go to dinner with those guys. And believe you me, it was an amazing experience. But again, like you got to know when to just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, yeah.
And I really just sat there and just took it all in, kept my mouth shut. But it was amazing, to hear like stories from Jim Shooter about working with Wally Wood
Wow.
and how Wally Wood got him his first actual credit in a comic. Because back in those days, you weren't even getting a
Hmm.
credit as a writer or an artist.
Yeah. You were.
And just yeah, just these amazing stories about Wally Wood, and again, Jim Shooter just telling you about back in the old Marvel days, and yeah, it was an incredible experience. I was so thankful that John Beatty invited me to the dinner. Yeah,
That's
as
awesome.
far as like just to really get into like the nuts and bolts of like comics, especially from the '80s when I was actually a kid,
Hmm.
and just to when it was still like so magical. You know what I mean? like it's still magical to a point, but I see behind the curtain now. You know, I
Yeah.
actually work on comics, and
You got a different like sense of appreciation. You know how the
yeah,
sausage is made, and like you've dabbled in it. So I'm not even just dabbled, but you've worked in it so long. Like you've got a different sense of appreciation. Like the amount of hours in the process that it takes, and considering like we're talking about superstars from the '80s, their process was a lot more manual. So there was
yeah.
no, I imagine, shortcuts to like really take. So yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to say John Beatty. Does he? I don't know if he lives in Florida or not, but he tends to make his rounds in Florida conventions. I know that he's a regular at like Collective. I'm sorry, not Collective Con, but a regular at MegaCon at times. I think Heroes
Right.
Con is one. He might be in the South, but yeah, it's awesome to see any time that his name is on there. And if you can catch a comic convention with Jim Shooter, and you claim to be a Marvel fan, especially of like the '80s and '90s, it is well
Right.
worth like trying to sit in on one of his panels. Okay, good stuff. All right, Andrew. Second to last question. The last question will give you a chance to plug in anything you got
All right.
going on. But
And I hate to say this, but I think my battery's about to die on my phone. So hopefully we can get through
yeah, I
this.
got you. I'll make it quick. I'll make it quick. But Andrew, I love asking this question anytime we have industry professionals like yourself because I get so much response about it from all the aspiring comic creators listening. So this is for you guys out there that are comic artists, self publishers, and all that. If you were to give one piece of advice to an aspiring comic creator that's listening right now, based on something you wish you would have known prior to
Hmm.
starting your career in comics, what would that be?
Okay, I've got this. This is a good one here. Um, if you're aspiring to be a comic book artist, whether inker or penciler, and you want to work on a monthly book, you need to discover very quickly how fast you really are.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And my advice is that if you can't pencil 2 pages in a day, you're not going to make it.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? So you have to find out what is your level of quality. What's the highest quality that you can get in a page and pencil it at least one a day. And this is when this is how you kind of choose your career in comics. Like if you want to be a super amazing artist, like say like you're Adam Hughes, right?
Hmm.
Who's just stellar. I mean, he's not just a great comic artist. He's a great like I would put him as up there with the classic American illustrators like
Hmm.
your Rockwells and Leyendecker. So obviously he can't churn that out. Occasionally he might be able to do it monthly, but it's only for I think a few issues. And it's amazing.
Hmm.
But I mean, so you got to decide: are you going to be like Adam Hughes and really just be probably a great cover artist, or if you're going to have a style that you can do a little bit faster, which is still amazing. Like say, like be like a Matteo Scalero, who he can easily do a page in a day, and it still looks amazing.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes to make it in this business.
Damn. That is, I love the honesty, and that sounds like a very important equation that all comic creators or aspiring comic creators should probably
Yeah.
ask themselves.
Well, you have to look deep inside
Hmm.
yourself and figure out who you are.
Well
I know
said.
it's, again that sounds kind of like a cliche, but it's so true. You got to discover what you're made of. How fast are you? How good are you?
Yeah.
Can you handle the pressure? Can you do a page one day, then you can do it 5 days a week? 4 weeks in a month. Can you? Do you have it in you?
Solid advice and solid answer. I mean, solid advice, and I think that's a solid question everyone should be asking themselves. All right, Andrew. Look, I'll have plenty of links to your channels and your socials in the show notes. So I highly encourage everyone listening to check those out if you want to give Andrew a follow. Highly recommend also buying yourself a copy of The Fifth Beatle too. All right, if you haven't read it and you're a music fan that also loves comics, it's a great read. But Andrew, can you give the Shortbox Nation insight into what you got going on as far as future projects or what they could look forward to from you this year?
I've got a new book that I'm working on, be published by Image, but I really can't discuss it yet. But hopefully, we're getting close to be able to solicit. So that's my main focus, and then I've got some covers coming out for Remender's new books,
Hell yeah.
and yeah, kind of quietly, like working on some new projects and just trying to get stuff off the ground. So not really a whole lot that I can show right now, but yeah, hopefully. if you check out my Instagram, you'll at least be seeing some new commissions and stuff like that.
Good stuff. I'll be looking forward to the announcements, and hopefully we can have you back on when you can talk about that stuff. But besides that, Andrew, I'm gonna look forward to seeing you at Collective Con this weekend. Thank you so much for your time, man. This was fantastic.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it.
All right.
I'll see you this weekend.
Oh yeah, man. Be well. Take care. Bye.
All right, you too.